Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Gwinnett County Public Library for our Sundays in Swanee series. My name is Miriam Mayer, and I am an Adult Services Specialist for the library. Today, we will hear from author Tiphanie Yanique as she discusses her new book, Monster in the Middle. After her talk, we will open it up for questions from the audience. Her book is also available for purchase, so if you haven't purchased your copy, you can do so with our bookstore partner, Eagle Eye Bookshop. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for today. Tiphanie Yanique is an award-winning novelist, poet, essayist, short story writer, and an Emory University professor. Tiphanie is the author of the novel Land of Love and Drowning, which won several awards and was listed by NPR as one of the best books of 2014. Tiphanie is also the author of a collection of award-winning poems, Wife, and a collection of stories, How to Escape from a Leper Colony, which won her a listing as one of the National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35. She has been listed by the Boston Globe as one of the 16 cultural figures to watch out for, and her writing has been published in the New York Times, Best African American Fiction, the Wall Street Journal, and American Short Fiction, among other places. Tiffany's newest book that she will talk about today, Monster in the Middle, won the 2022 Books All Georgians Should Read Award. Please welcome Tiphanie Yanique.
Good afternoon again. I'm so excited to be in person. Are you guys excited to be in person? Oh my goodness. I had the option to do this on Zoom or in person. I'm like, in person, I can't wait to see people. The one thing about being in person though is that I had to get babysitting for my kids, so I am sorry for being a few minutes late. Little babysitting snafu. But thanks to the tech guys. Thanks for starting us over, making us look good up there. Rob and George behind the mics helping us out. Thanks to Amy, Denise, and Miriam for making this possible. And big shout out to Eagle Eye Bookshop. Thanks to our independent bookstores. We need you. We love you. We're so glad you're here. And we should support our bookstores as much as we can because we need them. I mean, writers actually really depend on independent bookstores, and they need. We need folks to support them, both buying new and used books. So thank you guys for being here. And thank you guys for coming. I'm gonna chat a little bit about my book, and I'm probably gonna read for a little bit, because I feel like that's nice, right? Like, I'll be your granny for the afternoon, and you can just surrender, just relax. You could even fall asleep, I won't be offended. I'll be like, success, like I did a good job. So this book is called Monster in the Middle. And the piece I'm going to actually read from is a section halfway through that's called Monster in the Middle. It's like the part of the book that's in the middle of the book. And the book is about being American in many ways. I'm from the Virgin Islands, which is a territory of the United States. And we in the Virgin Islands have a kind of vexed relationship to our Caribbeanness and to our Americanness. But we are both Americans and Caribbean people at the same time. And a lot of my wanting to trouble this question of what it means to be American happened in 2017 when I was about maybe 8 years into writing this book. It was a book about maybe very other things, radically different things. And then in 2017, 2 really major hurricanes hit the Virgin Islands. We had 2, it was Category 5 hurricanes, and they hit within a week's time. And maybe you guys remember that time. It was a big deal in the region. We know that Puerto Rico was hit by Hurricane Maria, but the Virgin Islands was also hit. And we had actually been hit by a hurricane just a week before Maria. Puerto Rico had actually come to help us out. But then when Maria hit, Puerto Rico was also devastated and couldn't come help us. So my family and friends back home, had their roofs fallen off, the cars rushed down the street in waves. My old high school, the street that I walked up every day, Monday through Friday, had turned into a river. And then another hurricane hit. So it was we had that level of devastation and then another hurricane. And I remember I was here in the States, I lived in New York at the time, And I remember looking on the news to find where was more information about the Virgin Islands, about those hurricanes that had hit. And the news kept saying, well, the hurricanes are going to hit the United States event, in the next couple of days. And I remember thinking, but it already hit the United States when it hit us in the Virgin Islands, because we are American citizens and our land is American soil. And I remember thinking, like, wait, people have it wrong. Like, it hit America 3 days ago, 4 days ago, 5 days ago. And we weren't getting the kind of attention I felt that we should have been getting. And I thought some of that maybe is our responsibility as Virgin Islanders to really ask more questions about what it means, what our Americanness means. So that veered the book in some really different directions. It's also a book about love. It's a book about falling in love, being in love, like the good, sexy kind of love. I said that this is my dirty, sexy romance novel. There's a lot of dirty, sexy romance in the book, so I would say don't give it to your kids under 12. Or maybe like under 16, depending on how strict a parent you are. Like my kids can't read it. But it is a romance novel, and part of what I'm arguing in the book is that romance is, in many ways, a political act. And who you love and how you love have social ramification and is influenced by society. And so the book is really, in many ways, about how our American identity impacts how we love and who we love. And what even the little tiny things that we think are just us, like we think we just chose these things, that those things are actually being chosen by all of us as a society, as a culture. So I'm going to read from the chapter called Monster in the Middle. This is a chapter that's actually voiced by a guy. So I'm your granny, but I'm also like, maybe I'm a dude too. I'm your grandfather reading a story. So I'm going to read this chapter, which is also a short story. And I'll do his voice a little bit, and you guys can just pretend like it's not me in this cute dress, but it's like a old guy telling the story. And I'll read for maybe about 15 minutes, and then I'll open it up to questions. Okay? Monster in the Middle, the story of Stella's dad, Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Listen, daughter. There is no way to know anything for sure, and thank God for that. Thank God for that New Year's Day, 1968. That day the monster was on my back, but then again, the monster has always been coming for me. I'm a warm-blooded person because of where my blood comes from, island blood. Thank God for that blood and for that island, but sweet Stella, daughter, I had never been so cold. The monster was in the air. Maybe the monster was trying to yam me, eat me, but there I was. I was the kind of boy, and I was still a boy, who would come to wear sweaters in the summers of South Carolina, let my mother kiss my forehead that morning, then climbed aboard a plane, nothing with me but a bag, one change of light clothes suitable for the West Indies, a toothbrush, a razor, the last because my mother had heard that there would be no one there who knew how to cut my black boy hair, though she hadn't thought about my needing a winter coat. And thank God for that long plane ride where I was too excited to be scared, and so I watched the sky. And for that long sleepless bus ride where my sudden fear kept me from rest. Thank God for this St. Thomas boy in a bus, me, not sleeping, but looking out the window as it became winter before my eyes, cold monster. Did I clarify that it was New Year's Day? That the kiss was my mother's last? She was dying of cancer, but you know that part already, right, sweet girl? Breast. Though no one but me and a doctor over in Puerto Rico knew, I wasn't allowed to tell a soul because sickness of the breast or the uterus or any part of the body that we call private, the parts we use to make love, to make life, sickness in those parts was a shameful thing. And so I boarded that plane and climbed aboard that bus, maybe heading to my own death, not sure, but feeling also that I likely never see my mother again. But still, thank God for the burn in my mother's breast before I left. Thank God for her kiss goodbye that let me know it was indeed goodbye. I could tell you more about my mother, your grandmother. I should. For even she is the monster and her mother too. I just want to explain how this goes. It's a journey, but you're not alone in it, my love. None of us is. You feel alone, but you also take the journey because you don't want the loneliness. Many people go off to war because they want to be left alone, but left alone and lonely, different things those. Me, I didn't want either, baby. Just don't be confused by my life or all these lives. It's easy, really, to understand. See, these lives are yours. Have I made it clear that I am so thankful? Thank God for my memories and thank God for the memories that made me. We can't outrun the monster. And girl, did they make us run that first night. The winter air like pins in my nostrils, and I had a bloody nose before a mile, but kept running because the drill sergeant was shouting and because everyone else was running too. No matter that I was in short pants and air colder than I'd ever known, thank God for those short pants. Thank God for the ash on my knees that looked like a disease. Thank you for the blood in my nose that busted out and coated my mouth and neck and shirt and scared those sergeants just enough. That night, I shivered so loudly that a bunkmate threw his blanket on me. Thank you, mate monster, generous monster, thank God. That extra blanket, it helped. I slept, but it started again and again. Every morning, the blasted running, and every night, the cold, and the sweating in the cold, and the sweat freezing me, and the letter in the mail before basic was even out, telling me that my mother was dead. The question you must have is what is at the middle of it all? I'll tell you, even though I shouldn't, doesn't matter. You'll still have to do the thing to know it. What's there at the middle? Myth, magic, both. No shame in it. We all know it takes a village to raise a child, but I can tell you honestly that it takes an ancestry to make a man or a woman. And I would never have made it to my middle if it wasn't for my mother dying and for my daddy being already dead, because then I would never have signed up myself for a war we would surely lose, a war everyone else was running from. My father had been fighting a war his whole life, a white man he was, from the continent, a proper American. But not white, Cajun, he always insisted. Had fought in a war or two, seen nothing but combat. Finally, too shocked in the mind and broken in the body, and so found himself stationed in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas. But it wasn't sunny for him. Lived on our island, but lived like he was already dead, absent without leave in no time, made a half-breed baby who looked nothing like him, me. Then sat down on the bench outside a rum shop praying to die until he did. But even then, I'm thankful. Thankful to you, old monster. Thank you, dear suicidal poppy. I went to the American war to outwar him. But then my mother died and it was so cold and, well, that wasn't my true middle. No, we are the middle. This right here is the middle always. And oh, I am so thankful for that, because though everyone was heading to Saigon, I was not me. It wasn't that I had connections, no Rockefeller father to save my backside, no joining the Air Force instead of the Army. We didn't even know about those ways out back on the island. Army it was, my own no choice. The base cold as an ice chest, my lips frozen and my teeth knocking. No one could understand anything I said. I hadn't learned to talk Yankee yet, so I didn't say anything. All I had to do was fake sick. I've been living with sickness for over a year, close to it. My mother had told me she'd never breastfed me. Baby formula just arriving on island when I was born. Everyone thought the powder was better best. So mommy scraped to provide it for newborn me. And what I'm trying to say is that even as a baby, I'd never seen my own mother as God created her. But then as a grown man, I had to face her breast, care for it that long, hot summer of love, the nipple sinking in, the huge red blister that took over until my mother dived into it, the blister and the breast. I was there, taking care of sickness. I knew it well. Thank you, God. Black boy bile, the officers called it. In America, I was the black boy despite my half-blood history. Coughing up spit, all fake, but it fooled them. Remember, sweet one, I'd bled so bad those first days. It wasn't that I was a coward, it was just that I realized I didn't want to war with the history of my old man. Not after all. I didn't want anymore to hold up my life to his and see if mine was more worthy. Not after my mother died. I never really knew the man, my father. He didn't live long enough. He was my first monster, maybe. And I knew he would follow me, has followed me. But with a dead mom, well, I decided I wasn't going to nom. I wasn't going to be the drink till I'm dead poppy this time of maybe half Mongoloid children, but still. His story is mine because I lived against him. This made his life as much an influence as if I lived beside him. I didn't get that then, but now I just thank God. Because America believed me. Even though they couldn't always catch what I was saying, I'd been a good talker back home. Talked to the doctor, talked to my aunt about what to do with my mother's things in the event. The Army officers believed I was sickly, too sickly to shoot a gun good, too sickly to even look like a good target, so sickly. Me? My whole life up to then, I never even had the flu. I'd sprained my thumb once, but never a wrist or even an ankle. Sick wasn't my thing. Until it was, then faking it so well made it so real, and now that's how you know me. Your poor papa, your hypochondriac dad. Well, the war. For me, there was no walking among tropical trees that might make me long for home, no blinding light just before the rat-a-tat of a screaming enemy, no warm sweat in my face and pits. My war stayed cold and quiet. I was put to ironing the uniforms of those who came back dead. I ironed alone and in air conditioning, had to keep the clothes crisp, ready them for their formal funerals. Easy work on the body, hard on the mind. Because it was Vietnam times, and so you know about the many who came back dead, and so you know about the many shirts I had to iron, and so you know about the many monsters that lived with me. I never fought in that war. I ironed, and I did it well, did it tender, like how you do your drawing, your art. So to that I say, thank God for every color, for every sizzle of the metal when it kissed this starch. Thank you, God, for the dead who came home for me to dress them. Because, dear God, what happens to my child is on me, my fault, and my parents' fault, and Vietnam's fault too, because when I saw you in that basket, you reached to me, and it wasn't like you wanted to be picked up, no ma'am. It was that you wanted to embrace me, rub me on the back, just a baby, but already assuring me that I was going to be fine, 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 fine. So you know about need, knowing since you were a Tunchi thing, my fault, for sure. But what I'm trying to say also is that you could choose against me, daughter, like I did my pop. It worked for me when I turned away from instinct. Go with your gut, my mother used to say, but sweet girl, the gut isn't always good. Depends on what you've been feeding it. Because regardless, this monster is still coming for you. It's always coming for you. The undershirts hot from the dryer, they came for me. And I was thankful for the heat in that cold, cold room, and that is my whole war story. No clearing of light and jungle of grenades, just a still life of stiff shirts. I was an artist in there of a sort. Pants with creases that could cut you. Being honest, sickly since is the small price I pay, and I am thankful for my wife and my boys, and for you, the daughter who chose me, the one who cares for me best. I do thank God. I'm only sick now because I wasn't dead before. And let me tell you, there were so many ways to die in America that 1968. So for me now, it's gonna be cancer, like my mother. What else would it be? Mine in the private prostate. The story of the monster on my back, the monster on your back, is not just one of fathers and daughters, but also mothers and sons and mothers and daughters and even grandparents and aunties and first loves and seconds and third loves and who knows what else. It's all there, meeting you in the middle where you are, where you always are. This is how the whole of history works, sweet girl, and you and me and the whole of us, we aren't anything separate from history. When the government released me, there was the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, the GI Bill they call it now. It was that or keep working heat in the cold, pushing an iron was all I learned in the Army. I did it expert, but it didn't serve me. Couldn't go back home to our island of St. Thomas just then. There was no one there anymore, not yet anyhow. So what did I do? I wandered. Years of that, small jobs, medium jobs, Malcolm had been killed, King too. By then I was American enough for that all to matter to me. It seemed like black manhood was dead. Guess that was the point. Took me a while, years, to get on a good path, but I knew I didn't want to be alone or lonely. So eventually I marched to Morehouse, where the Afro-American boys went, like it was my duty. Because yes, this is an American love story. Because on that first day of school orientation, there was a speech for Morehouse men and Spelman women. The two schools tied up together. The speaker said that thing I gather now all the college presidents in America always say, white or black. The person sitting next to you might be your future husband or wife. And me? I was at the end of the row. I was older than most, and I'd been unsure about coming to the big meeting to begin with. By then, I was even a little ashamed at having been a soldier at all. Death will do that to a man. So I'd snuck in late. On one side, there was no one next to me, and I stared at that empty space for a while to think about that. It had been so lonely ironing all those years. No buddies to grieve over because they were dead when they came to me. But thank God for that New Year's Day. And for all the New Years and New Days, I am thankful for all of it, every bit. Because there in the Great Hall with that man talking about looking to our right and our left, who was that man? I wish I could thank him. He spoke so well and so clear. I turned from the emptiness at my right, and there to my left, your mother. Looking at me like she'd been on a long journey just to get to that self-same spot. And when she said, "Good morning," I heard her accent of Virgin Islander, and at her feet, a baby basket. What year was it? 1993 must have been, because in the basket, you. Sleeping, though I would come to know that sleeping wasn't so much your style. Me, I didn't know yet how your mother could curse me like cursing could kill, how she could love like love alone would make me live, how she could take a motherless man, me, and make a father and a husband. All I knew was that I hadn't heard those St. Thomas songs in so long, sounded like my own mother. And then you made a noise like about to holler, and me and your mother together looked into the basket, your eyes open, looking at me like you already knew I'd be your daddy. Your arms reaching out to me like you've been waiting for me to find my way to you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I read for a little bit longer than 15. I hope you guys are okay. But I thought I would finish it. So that's in the middle of the book, and it's one of the main characters' dad, and as I hope became clear, he's talking directly to her. And all the chapters in the book are characters telling love stories to the next generation. Like, how do we learn to love? Often because we watch a lot of TV, or because our parents, have told us, here's how I met your dad. And maybe that was good, maybe it was bad. And there are actually lots of stories in the book that are problematic, that are toxic, but also many, like this one, I hope, that is beautiful and uplifting. And so the characters at the end, they are coming to find each other with all of these narratives carried inside of them. So, questions from you guys?
Well, first of all, I loved it. Dr. Bennett, so thank you very much for writing it. I read that they started as short stories, you mentioned yourself, and I was just curious about that process. Like, did you always know they were going to become a novel? Did you write them separately and then realize that they should be put together, or what was the process?
So, it says a novel on the cover, and although I hope my publishers don't get mad at me for saying this, it's really a short story collection. But novels move better. So, they fly off the shelves a bit more quickly. But all the stories are connected, so it's a form that we call these days a novel in stories. I wish we could have put a novel in stories on the cover, but my publisher was like, just put novel. And I love my publisher and respect them, and it's their job to move the book. My job is just to write it. So I said fine. But for me, I started off actually just writing stories and didn't really think about whether or not they were connected for a long time. But I've been writing this book probably for about 14 years. So in the course of 14 years, it moved and changed quite a lot. And in those 14 years, I wrote a more traditional novel that's a more linear novel that follows the same characters throughout, whereas this follows different characters constantly. I wrote another short story collection that was a more traditional one where that's not linked at all. I wrote a book of poems. So I was kind of learning things about what is a novel, what is a short story collection, what is a poetry collection, and then I wanted to kind of play with all of those things in this book. So in many ways, this book is like a study in form, the way that poets might think through form, like the villanelle or the sonnet. So I'm doing that in fiction here. It's also a novel, like how do I create a book about a whole family and a whole ancestry. But it's also very much a short story collection because every story is its own little capsule that can really exist without the other stories around it. And I even played with the idea of like not having it in this order. For a while I thought about different orders. I wondered if my publisher would allow me to just have like 4 different issues of the book that were in different orders, and they're like, no, that's too expensive. And that's also too experimental and crazy. So even the linearity of it is somewhat in question. So if you've read it, so you know that it begins and then it stops and it sort of begins again halfway through. Yeah. So it just took a while, a long time. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Is any part of the book autobiographical?
No, but also yes. In a way, the whole book is autobiographical. In a way, even what I read to you is autobiographical, even though it's a guy serving the Vietnam War before I was even born. I use a lot of stories from people who I know and love. And the one thing about being a writer is that my family's always like, oh God, she's gonna write about us. No, no, no! You know, they're always afraid. And I've often been in the audience, I've been up here and I've had people in the audience who are my family members and they'd be like, don't say my name. So I won't say names. But I have uncles and my brother is currently a soldier, and so I used a lot of their stories to weave that story. So it's not based, on my life in particular, but it is based on my understandings in many ways from them. I have a character who lived in Ghana. I did live in Ghana for a time, and I used my experiences there to kind of fuel some of her experiences or like her realities. I'm from the Virgin Islands, as is one of my main characters, so I use that. But she has I grew up very poor. My character grows up very middle class. So I would say that there are aspects of it that I am in here, but there's nothing really that is actually autobiographical. It's kind of I think fiction is one of the scary things about fiction is that people always think things are autobiographical that are not, but then the real truth is that it's all me still. And that's, in some ways, it's kind of worse because it means that like this is how messed up my brain is, right? Like it's not that all this just happened to me. It's like I could think all this crazy stuff up. It's maybe even more exposing in some ways. But I think that's the reality of writing fiction is that if you're going to write it well, you have to at least feel it well. But sometimes things that really happen to you, you don't write very well because it's so close and you only see your perspective and you can't see around yourself. So I haven't written like a memoir yet. In many ways, because I probably haven't, the things I might want to write about are still so close and present to me that I don't know if I have the distance to write about it well just yet. But yeah, this is fiction. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So why does the first chapter start with Oakland, California? Because I know that place very well.
Mm-hmm. I know everybody's mad at me. So I feel like this book made some people mad at me. I never had a book make some people mad. I wrote a book about divorce, and people were happy. People were like, "Yeah, girl, divorce." And people were like, "Ooh, people are mad at me with this book." There are a lot of difficult things in this book. There's a map. If you don't have a copy, that opens the book. And I had a map in my previous novel, but it was a map of the Virgin Islands. This is a map of the United States where I have the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and I also sort of reference other territories of the United States. And what I wanted was to write a narrative that really, the book itself would map the U.S. And I wanted to think through, like, well, where do I want to I want to be in the Virgin Islands, but I also want to be across the United States. I don't know enough about Hawaii and Guam, but I want to go. I want to go west. So I know California pretty well. My best friend is from the Oakland area, and I've visited there. She's my godmother to my kids. So I thought I could start out there, use what I know from a lot of her experience, and the book opens up at the San Francisco earthquake in the 1980s, which my best friend lived through. So I use her stories about what that was like to write that section. But we start, way as far west as I felt comfortable with, that I felt I had some expertise over, and then we just move across and back and forth and weave around the United States. So that's part of why I started out there. Also, I think I wanted to start off with our early generation, and that was the character. I knew I wanted my characters to end up in a black city for different kinds of reasons. I didn't know it would be Atlanta when I first started writing it. I actually had never lived in Atlanta. I had visited, but Atlanta wasn't necessarily where it was going to be. In fact, I wrote all the Atlanta scenes before I moved here. I feel almost like the book called me to come live here. Because I remember I actually came to visit Emory, not for a job, but I came just because my previous book, Emory invited me to come give a presentation, as I'm doing for you guys now. And I read part of this book in the presentation. And then afterwards, I said, I'm looking for, I want my characters to end up in a black city for all kinds of different reasons I'm thinking through like blackness in America. And I think Atlanta might fit. But I need like a sort of like working class, middle class, black neighborhood. And this guy was like, let's go to Ellenwood. So we drove around Ellenwood. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna set it in Atlanta. So I had to actually come back to Atlanta quite a lot to visit, so that my research was, at least give me the pretense of expertise, because I hadn't lived here at that point. But yeah, I did want the characters to sort of swerve around. And Fly's father, Fly is my Atlanta character, and his dad is the one who's in Oakland. Yeah. So we begin with his dad. I thought that was going to be a harder question. Yes.
So you mentioned that it took you 14 years to write this book.
Yeah.
So why did it take you that long, and what is your writing process?
Well, there are a lot of reasons why books take me a long time. One is that I allow them to do that. I don't mind taking time. I have a job that pays my mortgage and provides healthcare for my kids. So I don't need the books to do that for me. But for me, that means that I can really make sure that they're as beautiful as possible before I send them out to a publisher. I think if I was dependent on the books to make my money, I would just be like Daniel stealing them, But I can allow them to feel like artistry, and so I do. And I don't give them to my agent or to my editor until I feel like they feel beautiful to me. I do a lot of reading my books out loud as part of my editorial process. So if they don't read well to me, I'm not gonna send them to the publisher. Because I wanna be able to do what I did for you guys today, which is read and feel like I'm doing a good job, and that the work actually has that poetic energy in there, even if you didn't hear me doing the reading. So that takes a while, I think. But also, I was writing other books during the time period that I was writing this book. Those books took me a long time too. My first novel took me about 11 years. My story collection took me 9. So my process is to be working on multiple things at once, to always have a lot of projects going. I don't believe in writer's block. I think that's just a tired, a bored, a hungry, something, it's something else. So I don't ever get tired of the work because I just have something else to work on. If this thing feels like I can't move it, then I'll just be like, it needs some time away. I need time away from it. So I'll just go to this other thing instead, which helps me just I'm always writing and always feeling like I'm engaged in the material. So I don't really have anything precious about my process. When I first became a writer, I would be on panels with other writers and they would say I need my special glass of wine. Really? Sorry, why do you need that special glass of wine? But I just was I don't know. I don't want it to be too precious. I think also I grew up poor, so I didn't have a room of my own, like a lot of writers are supposed to have. So I just felt like I should write whenever I can and not wait for like some muse to hit me, not wait for my special pen, just write like whenever I can. So that allows me to work on multiple projects at once too. So I don't really have anything in particular in my process. I have a very messy, freewheeling process. I'm disciplined in that I'm always just doing the work, and that I do the work whenever I can, like without question. If I have 5 minutes, I will just write. But I have 3 kids, so I don't even get those 5 minutes that often. But when I do, I take good advantage of them. Yeah, but I think the short answer is that I just allow the books to take time, and that is really a privilege. I feel very lucky that I can do that.
When you say it took 14 years, do you feel yourself evolving, like from that first chapter to when you finish this book, your process, your style? Do you feel differently? Do you look back and say, man, I'm a different person when I wrote that?
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm a better writer, I need to rewrite that. You know, like that happens quite a lot actually. Like I think, wow, I know so much more about writing a male character than I did when I first started this process. I need to go back and do a better job with the earlier sections. So yeah, I think that hopefully I get better, I think I do. And then that causes me to go back and revise. So my revision process is very, very long. I will sometimes draft things pretty quickly. Like I might draft the whole book in a year or two, but then the revision is where I'm really taking that long, long time. In this book, you know, I also wanted it to be about like the national politics, and I wanted it to end. So the book actually ends at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it ends in the spring of 2019, right when I was like handing the book to my publisher. And it takes about a year from the time you're actually done with the book to then it becoming like it getting in print, because they have to like design the cover and all kinds of stuff, figure out like which bookstores they're gonna send it to, and like get reviews out in the world, all this kind of stuff. So it takes like a whole year. So I handed it to her at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was like, okay, I want the book to feel like it's now. Whoever reads it in the first year of it being published will experience a kind of nowness in the book, which I wanted people to feel. But originally, like way back when I was first ending the book, the first end was Hillary Clinton winning the presidency. Right, that was because I thought that was what was gonna happen. So that was how I had ended the book, and I remember being like, just waiting, you know, for November to figure out if I would have to edit it again or not, and then being like, oh wow, I have to edit the book again, because I had thought like that's how, and I had this whole elaborate ending. I was like predicting the future, and I am no Cassandra. My prediction was false. So I had to. I mean, it took me years to rewrite that ending and to rethink like what would be the important national moment to end the book, and COVID-19 ended up being that moment. Yeah.
Do you teach creative writing at Emory?
I teach creative writing and I teach Caribbean literature. I'm a fiction professor. I teach a little bit of poetry too, and literature. We have such a great program there. Send your kids. It's true. It's pretty bomb. It's really amazing.
What kind of topics you will touch upon in your plays?
So my first book of poems is called Wife, and despite the title, it's actually a book mostly about divorce. And it's a book that maybe, like, I know when it gets taught at university, it gets taught in like feminist literature classes or women's studies classes. A lot of it is about like the ways in which wifehood can sometimes be very restricting for women, so can husbandry, and the ways in which the idea of the wife has been transformed over history. And then it's also about what it means to be unwifed. So that's a lot of ways what that book is about. The poems that I'm working on now are about issues around colonialism and race, as I continue to think about what it means to be a Virgin Islander. So a lot of those poems are about the idea that the Virgin Islands, not by name, but certainly by practice, is effectively a colony of the United States. And thinking through like, what does that mean to be from a colony? You know, if we were all in the Virgin Islands right now, we wouldn't have access to vote for president. We don't have representation in Congress. You know, this weird thing that we are American citizens and yet not quite. So a lot of the poems are about that. But I'm also remain interested in things around intimacy and family love, romantic love, friendship. So that's finding its way into those poems too. But I mean, I don't know when that book of poems will ever be finished. Maybe 20 years, we'll see. Hi.
Have any of those, I know you're working towards a collection probably with those poems about colonialism and such. Have any been published individually anywhere?
Yeah, the one that I can remember most recently, maybe it's like 2 weeks ago, a poem came out in the Yale Review. And it's got a long title, Invitation to a Pleasure Ride with Miss Phyllis Wheatley. That's the name of the poem. And it's actually based on some really interesting archival material discovered by this professor at Iowa State University. Her name is Tara Bynum. And she's a Phyllis Wheatley scholar, but I don't know if Phyllis Wheatley is this like really important poet in America, one of our first published Black poets, and she was publishing her poetry as an enslaved person. So she had a lot of friends who supported her and who she supported, Phyllis Wheatley. And there's some archive material by this guy named Cesar Linden. And Cesar Linden was also an enslaved man in the Northeast, where Phyllis Wheatley was from. And he was an accountant. So he was an enslaved Black man and an accountant, which I think is interesting because often we think of slaves as like doing hard labor, and we think that we kind of sometimes are taught to like forgive the slave master, like, well, he didn't know that the Black people were intelligent. They didn't know, but this man had this Black man as his accountant, like handling all his financial affairs. So he was an accountant. He kept an accounting book, and Professor Bynum was given an introduction, given a presentation on Cesar Linden's accounting book, and he had this list of goods, and it was like pig for killing, rum for killing the pig, and he had like the prices, like 2 shillings. It's all in British, monetary, because we were still British in America then. So he had all these then it was pepper, and corn. Oh, this was list, and then money for a carriage or whatever. And she asked the group, what do you think's gonna happen? What do you think what's this list for? And I would experiment on you guys, but I won't. I'll just tell you what it is. The group said to her, well, there's a lynching. This guy is a pig for killing. There's going to be a lynching, and Cesar is in trouble. And actually, it's Cesar's account book. He's going on a picnic, and it's an account book. He's going on a picnic specifically with his beloved, this woman named Sarah, who he's going to propose to. And we only know that because we see later that he's married Sarah, and he requests to have Sarah's company on this picnic. And I thought, this concept we have that I don't know, that the slave master or white people in America didn't know that Black people were fully sold and were falling in love and all that kind of stuff is nonsense. Here is Cesar Linden, an enslaved person, smart enough to handle your accounting books, who's requesting to go on a picnic with his lady. This is the person who's fully sold, right? S-O-U-L, right? Fully sold person. And I thought that's, just thinking through the ways in which we fool ourselves as humans, the ways in which we are so good at telling ourselves what makes it easier for us to do bad things, and how slavery, colonialism, all of those were ways that we spent a lot of time lying to ourselves as a humanity in order to gain the benefits of these really inhumane systems. So the poem is about that and how he kind of uses his connection to Phyllis Wheatley to enable him to go on this pleasure ride with his girlfriend. But yeah, so that poem is in the Yale Review. I think it came out, like I said, 2 weeks ago. Any other questions? Yes.
Like to read?
I'm sorry?
What books do you like to read? What genres and?
I am omnivore. I read everything, but if there is any process that I have, it's probably that I like to read a lot of poetry, even when I'm writing fiction, because it's really important to me to keep the musicality in the writing. I mean, I want to be dancing up here when I'm giving a reading, and I want that music to even be in the prose. So I do try and read poetry, especially when I'm revising, even when I'm revising fiction. but I read a lot of Jamaica Kincaid, who is sassy and bossy and amazing. I read a lot of Toni Morrison, who's, American genius. And I'm very lucky to work at Emory, where a lot of the people who work I admire are my colleagues, like Jericho Brown, who recently won the Pulitzer and is the director of creative writing over at Emory. So I'm, Tyree Jones, who's also one of my colleagues there. So I'm really lucky that I work with people whose work I actually admire and can talk to them about, how did you do this in your book? And then I can just steal it from them.
Was here.
Was he? Yeah, isn't he great? Yeah, he's really wonderful. I'm not sure what our timing is. Do we have time for more questions or what? Okay. I'm happy to, I like this, so I'm happy to answer more questions.
So what's next?
Well, I am working on this book of poems, although working is maybe too strong a word. I am writing poems, but I'm also working, and this is more working on a collection of essays. So during what we might call the George Floyd summer, or the summer of Black Lives Matter, which is also the beginning of COVID-19, I was getting a lot of questions and a lot of requests to write essays about Blackness in America. And I'm a mom, and I have 3 Black kids, 2 of them are boys, and the George Floyd summer was really impactful to my family, especially to my boys. My eldest, who was very aware of what was going on and was scared. Our family protested, and he often would not come because he was like, I am too scared to go out there. And also my daughter, who's in the middle, who felt very protective of her brothers, and which I didn't really understand until somebody interviewed her at one of these marches we were on and said, how do you feel? And she says, I feel okay, but I'm really scared for my brothers. And I hadn't actually realized that that's what she was experiencing. So I've been writing a lot about that, but in a way in which I want to think about how we cannot be happy unless we are safe. That the idea that true happiness requires actual safety. And so a lot of the book, as I think it will be, is actually about ways in which the Black body strives for joy and happiness, but must also be protected and be safe. As I think in particular about my children, but also about all the people who I love in my family and my friends. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. My mother is a former librarian. My grandmother is a former librarian. And these are the 2 women who raised me. And I will do anything for a library. So I am so glad to have been asked to come here. Ask me to do anything, I will always say yes. So thank you so much for having me, guys. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tiffany, for that wonderful talk. It's really great to know how you weaved yourself into this book and that it took you that long, but just to make a really, really good book with wonderful stories. And thank you to you all for joining us for our Sundays in Swanee series. We will have Tiffany here to sign books if you have your copy. So thank you again for coming, and we hope to see you for the next one.